Well, thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and TechAdvice.live video interview. I'm here at Samsung's launch of their 2024 range of TVs, 4K models, 8K models, and I'm here with Paweł Achtel. He's the CEO, president, founder, and a director of Achtel.com, or Achtel Proprietary Limited, a provider of products and services to the cinema industry and to cinematographers. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, now I last met you in Las Vegas at a Samsung event, and you were working with Samsung there and here today. So just tell us a little bit about your collaboration with Samsung.
Okay, so I have a long-standing collaboration with Samsung. I worked with the Irvine, California R&D facility, and we were collaborating on perception, human perception, between 8K and 4K.
Yeah.
It turns out that a lot of content that's supposed to be 8K is not really easy to discern between 4K when it's played on 4K TV and 8K TV.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of essence of the research.
And your equipment actually demonstrated that there was a visible difference between 4K and 8K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was I supplied some of my some samples of our content, and they realized, oh wow, now we can see the difference. So a part of the research treats of the type of content and also the amount of sharpness that is in a content versus how many.
Just resolution.
Just resolution?
Yeah.
Because resolution is not necessarily the same thing as sharpness.
Now, you were explaining this to me a little bit before. I mean, resolution is to do with the number of pixels, but sharpness is something called MTF. So what is MTF?
MTF is essentially a fancy name for contrast versus the detail.
Yeah.
So MTF stands for modulation transfer function, and it's essentially a measure of contrast between 0 and 100%. 100% is,
White out.
really there.
Yeah.
0% you can't
black,
see it.
right, yeah.
It's basically mush.
Yeah.
And anything in between. And that's usually measured against different size of the detail, or spatial frequency as we call it.
Yeah.
So the finer the detail, the lower the contrast, until it reaches 0 at a certain point, and we can't see actually that fine detail. If it's less than 20%, chances are that you won't be able to see it. You can still measure it, but you can't see it.
Yeah.
And what's special about the 9x7 camera that my company brought is that those levels of micro contrast are extremely high. So for 8K TV, we're looking at around 50% contrast at the Nyquist limit, at the resolving limit of 8K sampling frequency, which is a lot. And that allows us to actually see that tiny detail.
Now, as we were recording, overnight, it was the solar eclipse in the US. And I saw many of these images on X that were showing that what they expected to see was this black, black image with a little ring of sun. And what they actually saw was a grey sort of bunch of clouds. So I'm wondering, were any of your cameras that you know of actually capturing the solar eclipse and getting the contrast right?
Yeah, no, not unfortunately, but I think it's been captured by, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, different cameras. So I'm sure it will be there in one shape or form.
Sure. Now, you've got some pretty impressive credentials in the industry. So just briefly run us what some of those are.
Yeah, so I worked across many genres. So from wildlife content for National Geographic, Discovery, BBC. I also worked on some features, and particularly with the new camera. There was Equaliser 3, Sony Pictures or Paramount Pictures. Mm-hmm. We were shooting VFX plates, 13 Lives, Meg 2 from Warner Brothers. All those productions used the 9x7 camera to capture VFX background plates.
And if people go to Achtel.com, they can actually see that camera there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So keep going, sorry.
I also worked with James Cameron's team on Avatar: The Way of Water. That was in a capacity of providing a specialized 3D optics and 3D beam splitter, which is a very innovative device that was used for the first time ever, and that allows us to see underwater environment in completely different way. It looks very natural, undistorted, flat image. We are only able to see those images on land, but in that sort of way, but not underwater until
your camera.
Well, not the camera, until the optic. They use Sony cameras,
Right.
But the optics that we developed were it's actually they patented optics. They allow a very unique, very natural, extremely immersive feel underwater. I'm not sure if you watched the Avatar.
I've seen parts, but sadly I haven't seen it yet. But what the parts I've seen were pretty impressive.
Yeah, so the way to watch it is in 3D, obviously, and what you will find that underwater images are very air-like. So it kind of feels like if it's in the air, but it's unmistakably underwater. And it provides this really wide-angle, immersive feel to it, which was not available, we haven't seen anything like that through a mask, through any port, or any other technology before or after, in fact.
So what got you interested and excited about cinematography?
Back a few decades ago, I started diving on the Great Barrier Reef, and I was so captivated by its beauty that I started filming it. So a lot of my career is filming wildlife, particularly underwater, and more recently I sort of came back on land as we all evolve, and created the probably biggest project in my life by far, the 9x7 camera.
And did you create this camera because there was just nothing else like
Correct.
it? I mean,
Correct.
The pain point was that you wanted the best vision, and the only way to get it was to make it yourself.
It's not the only one. There are some other ways of getting it,
Yeah.
like, for example, 10-camera array, multi-camera arrays, but they're extremely cumbersome, expensive, and you have to stitch all the images. You can't put them on a drone, you can't put them underwater, you can't put them in a car. It's very limited.
Yeah.
So having that capacity in a small, tiny package that you can take anywhere, in a helicopter, drone, on a gimbal, was extremely important. The camera is also 4:3 aspect ratio, so it's especially made for immersive cinema. IMAX is 4:3. All the domes are more sort of square than rectangular, so you need that height as well as the width and massive amount of sharpness in order to fill that 360 degrees with detail.
Now, we're seeing some of your footage on this QN900, the 8K television. We're not going to have a chance to sort of go through it. People have sort of been watching it as we've been discussing. But just talk us through some of this content briefly.
Yeah, so the content is being shot at the highest possible quality with 9x7 camera. So the level of detail is quite astounding, and it's free of aliasing or artifacts or artificial sharpening. It looks very natural, because
you can certainly see the detail, all the little hairs on the animals and just the eyebrows. I mean, it's just exquisite.
Yeah, well, what's important is how natural it looks. And I think the Samsung 8K particularly shows it really well because it's an HDR monitor. The content is HDR. And you can see that the detail is not only high contrast, but it's smooth, free of artifacts, which is not possible to just achieve by sharpening.
Yeah. Now, here we're using your 8K camera, but Samsung also has smartphones that record in 8K, the Samsung Galaxy S24 flagship series. Now, obviously, there's a huge difference between a phone and your camera. What, in a nutshell, for the audience, what's the difference between the two? Why would your cameras be so superior to a smartphone?
Well, our cameras record uncompressed, linear, raw, massive amounts of data. Excuse me.
They would have a big sensor and proper lenses.
That's right. It's a proper cinema camera with all the bells and whistles that you would expect, and color science to go with it. It creates color accurate images and gives us ability to have much more wiggle room in the post-processing.
Now, you also have 18K cameras, not just 8K cameras, but 18K. So what are they used for?
So that's the 9x7 camera.
Right.
It can deliver up to 18.7K measured on the screen sharpness. And we have workflows for that camera to produce that sort of levels of sharpness. It's a little bit mind-boggling because we're hitting limits of physics. So not many lenses go that far. And you have to have all the ducks lined up in terms of focusing, stability. There's a lot of factors to get that sort of levels of sharpness, but yeah, we can produce that.
So is this footage here downscale from 18K to 8K, or is it magnified? What's the short version of what we're seeing here?
It's both cropped and downscaled. So you're looking at about half of the image, and it's also downscaled.
So who's using your 18K equipment for work right now?
So there's a couple of companies that actually purchased our cameras. They are producing IMAX films, and there is a company in Netherlands that films for flying theater, which is quite amazing sort of immersive experience. Hollywood productions typically don't purchase equipment; they rent it. No, their business model is more on rental.
Sure.
It's not something that they're not in the process of buying and selling cameras. They're in the process of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So they usually want the latest, the greatest, with the right equipment for the right job. They don't have ability to store that equipment or service it.
Sure.
So they prefer to hire that equipment, and we facilitate both ways of using the cameras.
So how often do you update your technology? Is it, with phones it's every year, but I'm assuming with this it's probably a slightly longer cycle.
So we improve it continuously. The camera has been production ready 4 years ago, and it was already on high budget set 4 years ago, without any limitations. What we're now working on is quite sophisticated workflows, especially in color management, in expanding the dynamic range and reducing the noise. So we've been doing quite a fair bit of work in a refinement of the workflow processes.
And there's a research paper that you've been working on with Samsung. Just it's not available until April the 12th, which is a couple of days after we're recording this. I'll have the link available when it becomes live. But just tell us about this research paper.
So the research paper looks into how audiences of different ethnicity and age and expertise perceive 8K versus 4K. How much better, or whether it's equal, or how much difference there is between looking at the same content but looking at a 4K display and an 8K display. Because it's not just the TV that needs that sort of, as I said, sharpness is not the same as resolution.
Yeah.
So we have the resolution, but we also have to have content that has that levels of sharpness that audiences might or might not be able to discern. And also the type of content it depends on the type of the content, how audiences perceive it. So it's quite interesting, the findings that in that paper.
Now, of all the things we've spoken about, is there anything else that we need to know before we wrap up this interview about Achtel
Okay.
and your work?
Well, one thing is that I actually have one of those screens, the previous model myself. I use it for evaluating pictures. It's a good screen. So I'm quite pleased with, I bought it in a shop. I wasn't given a freebie.
Yeah.
It's quite a good screen to, it can be calibrated to be color accurate. It's an HDR screen, so I do use it for evaluating my images. And yeah, we're still working on improving 9x7. We might have a new camera early next year. and I guess the details will become available when they're ready.
And you were saying before you work with the Australian Cinematographer Society. You're a president or director. I mean, what are the short versions of that association with them?
Well, currently I'm a chairman for the Australian Cinematographers Society's technical committee. I'm also participating in IMAGO technical committee. That's a European cinematographers association or body. I'm also on GSCA, Giant Screen Cinema Association Technical Committee, where we basically work on standards for giant screen and IMAX, you know, how big it should be, how sharp it should be, or how bright it should be, that sort of thing. So yeah, I've been active in those organizations and trying to basically bring the levels of image quality up.
Raise the standard.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to talking to you on my TV show on TNT Radio.
Pleasure.
In the next few weeks. So congratulations and talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.